welcome to your weekly cosmic weather forecast. My name is Adeana. I'm an intuitive astrologer. In these weekly videos, we go over the astrology and the energy for the week ahead. In this week's forecast, we will be going over the energy for January 26th to February 1st, 2026. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you align with my energy and enjoy my content. This week is going to be a big week. We have Neptune making that final ingress into Aries on January 26th, Monday. As soon as we come into the week, we're going to feel that shift. Then we're going to start to feel the buildup of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Saturn's not going to enter Aries until February 13th. However, we will feel the buildup now. And then on February 17th, we have our first solar eclipse. So by the time we reach the end of this week, we have our full moon in Leo. And after that full moon in Leo, we are officially in eclipse season, and then the energy gets intense. So let's go over the energy for the week. So on Monday, we have Neptune entering Aries. We already have Mars now in Aquarius. Mars made that shift into Aquarius on January 23rd. So we now have all of the personal planets in Aquarius. Now, the thing I love about this is that Aquarius is all about new ideas. Ideas. That's like the first thing that comes to mind with Aquarius. New ideas, new ways of thinking, new mindset. So there's quite a lot of like new shifts going on as far as trying different things, new ideas. This could have to do with work, new creative pursuits, and we're going to get into it. But on Wednesday's a really good day this week for productivity, getting things done. And that's because we're going to have the moon in Gemini forming a trine to all of that energy in Aquarius throughout Wednesday. But before we get to Wednesday, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Neptune Neptune entering Aries on Monday. And then I want to talk a little bit about this Mars and Aquarius energy because this is where we can be really driven by ideas. Mars represents our drive, our willpower, and how we take action. And you may find that over the next month, because Mars is going to be in Aquarius from January 23rd until March 2nd, you're taking action or making decisions based on ideas or based on your mindset, based on your way of thinking, based on thoughts, right? So that can go, obviously, when we're talking about energies, there's always negative and positive to all of it. So being mindful and aware of this is key. However, I just love it for stepping into something new, trying new things, taking a new direction. We may also see a lot of action being taken out in the world based on groupthink. This is where we can see large groups of people taking action and speaking based on belief systems and freedoms. And so we already kind of are seeing a lot of that now with Mars in Aquarius. That can definitely amp up. Mars being the ruler of Aries, now having Neptune in Aries too. We want to remember that over the next couple of years, having Saturn and Neptune in Aries is going to also influence our Mars transits, how we're taking action, how we are. That's why I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot around people fighting for freedoms, fighting for sovereignty, fighting for personal. There's going to be a lot around identity, independence. This can show up in our own personal lives, in our own personal way. Make sure you check out my Saturn Neptune transit where I get in a video on my channel where I get into all 12 rising signs that will help you also navigate some of this energy. But this is all about identity shifting. This is a global reset. So it all begins now. I also think it's very interesting how Neptune enters Aries on Monday and there are storm warnings everywhere. I live in Canada. We're having a snowstorm today and tomorrow. I'm recording this on Sunday. I know that there's a lot of storms and warnings in the United States. that is such a representation of the astrology. Another thing is too is that we have Uranus stationing direct February 3rd. So we are approaching that station. That is also going to contribute to this because Mars is in Taurus, squaring some of this energy in Aquarius. Mars is the co-ruler, the modern ruler of Aquarius. So storms, I think, is going to be a huge thing at this time. And I think that as we approach that Mars station, the beginning of February, that's going to amp up. Storms, power outages, cell phone towers, all forms of communication being disrupted. I think that is what we are in for around the next month. And also, while we have this energy, especially Mars and Aquarius, and squaring, and then even too, we've got that Mars square to Uranus, February 27th. I think we will see a lot of these power outages, storm warnings amping up until then. So I think we should all prepare um, for the weather conditions and the possibilities of power outages and possibly even cell phones not working, maybe even internet shutting down. Who knows? With Uranus, it's very unpredictable, and we always have to prepare for the unpredictable. So I just want to put that out there. Just know that we are very much in this kind of disruptive energy, especially now having Mars in Aquarius. And as you can see, the weather is all kind of showing what the astrology is at the moment with the storms and people getting ready for power outages, and that there is a possibility that that can amp up as we move through February and then peak at the end of February, because February 27th is when we have that Mars Uranus square exact. So, coming into Monday, we have the moon in Taurus. Now, the moon being in Taurus is forming a square to all of that energy in Aquarius. So, yes, we are very much wanting to try new things, thinking outside of the box, moving in different directions, and we're finding this urge internally to do so with the moon in Taurus. This is just a day where maybe your emotional self is not aligning with that. The moon in Taurus is very much about comfort, stability, security, squaring all that energy in Aquarius. It's like today, I don't really feel like taking these sudden shifts or turns or twists or thinking outside of the box or trying something new. I'm going to wait until tomorrow, which I would say if you can, definitely do that, because once that moon shifts into Gemini, there's a trine formed to all of that energy that's in Aquarius, and that is where our emotions are now aligning with our mindset. Our emotions are now aligned with, okay, let's start moving with these new ideas and getting these projects done. Now, before the moon enters Gemini, we're going to have that Mars Pluto conjunction. And this is really important because what I talk a lot about in my videos, if you've watched my previous videos, you may hear me say this, but when we have conjunctions between planets, I always look at that as some form of a new seed, new intention that is planted. You always want to pay attention to what is showing up in your world at the time of these conjunctions, because at the end of this year, we will have the Mars opposition to Pluto. And also check out my rising sign horoscopes for 2026 on my channel. I get into this energy and where this can show up for you and the areas of life that are affected by this, but you definitely want to pay attention to what's showing up for you the beginning of the week with this Mars Pluto conjunction. When we are talking about Mars and Pluto, this is quite a volatile energy. Mars rules anger, aggression, conflict, impatience. Being in Aquarius is very much taking action based on ideas, taking action based on thoughts. Having that Mars Pluto um, conjunction is that energy of Pluto that is very deep, that is very intense, that is very powerful, possibly controlling. We can deal with power and control struggles or dynamics. There can be a lot of conflict, a lot of arguments with this energy. So we just want to be mindful. This is a Mars that is already very much driven by ideas, driven by making decisions and taking action based on something that is heard or something that you're thinking. And so you just want to be mindful of this energy. Pluto just creates just so much more intensity to it. Again, if you are in any situations that, any type of toxic relationships or anybody around you that has those attributes about them, or they can become violent or they have a short temper, this is a time to just be mindful of that, especially too, because as we move through the day on Tuesday, which this conjunction happens on Tuesday, January 27th, the moon is going to be connecting to Uranus for a short period throughout the day early on Tuesday, which is actually before like Mars is already at the 3-degree point, not by minute. So there's not an exact conjunction. However, it's still extremely influential. And Mars forming a conjunction to, the moon forming a conjunction to Uranus at the same time. Um, that is where, again, it's just adding more emotion into the mix so people can be making more decisions based on unstable emotions. So just be mindful. It's just an energy that we want to be mindful of as we move through the day on Tuesday. Once we get to later on in the day, the moon enters Gemini. So that is where our emotions and intuitions and instincts shift from this more wanting this feeling of stability, security, and comfort into feeling a little bit more sociable, feeling a little bit more um, communicative. And so when the moon enters Gemini, the moon will form a trine to the Mars Pluto conjunction. Now, before we move off of this energy, just again, keep pay attention to what's showing up the beginning of the week with the Mars Pluto conjunction, because there's intense energy at the end of the year when we have the Mars opposition to Pluto, and you may be revisiting those themes and topics. There may be something about what is showing up now coming back around as we reach the last 3 months of 2026. So, as we move through the day on Wednesday, we have the moon transiting through Gemini, forming a trine to all of that energy in Aquarius, really giving us that ability to kind of not just mentally have all these ideas and think about doing all these things, but actually feel like doing it more so. And then as we get to late Wednesday, early Thursday, we've got that Mercury conjunction to Venus. And so having the moon in Gemini, and then, Mercury rules Gemini. Mercury is going to be forming a conjunction to Venus in Aquarius. So this is where there can be a lot of conversations within relationships or just a lot of one-on-one dynamics. Again, we do want to just be mindful of that whole Mars Pluto opposition at this, or sorry, not opposition, conjunction. At this point, Mars will be moving away from the conjunction, but it still can be in the air. So just be mindful of that. But this is a good day that if you have any conversations that need to be had, I would say go ahead and have those conversations, especially with the moon in Gemini and Mercury being conjunct Venus. This is also really great for creative projects. I think this week, if there's anything that you've really wanted to start moving forward with, we're finally going to have some supportive energy to get these things done and really utilize the good energy while we have it, because as we move into February and we enter that first eclipse season, the energy is going to shift, and there's not too many months this year where we have a lot of stable energy and ground to kind of stand on. So we definitely want to utilize it this month while we have it. There's a lot of supportive energy to get things moving for the year, and this week is, I think, great for it. Now, the only thing I will say is that while we have the moon in Gemini, and this is kind of takes place about mid Wednesday, the moon is going to form a quick T square to the nodes, which are in Virgo and Pisces. The nodes representing something we are releasing, something we're letting go, or parts of us that are just no longer in alignment. The North Node representing some new direction. So, of course, this represents something different for all of you because it all depends on how this is showing up in your life at the moment. But the moon it being in Gemini, forming that T square for a quick second, there may be just some confusion about which direction to move in. Now, on Thursday, before we have the moon enter Cancer, the moon is going to form a square to Saturn. And this is where we can feel limited or restricted emotionally. So you may be trying to process something emotionally, or maybe you did have a challenging conversation or an interesting conversation with the Mercury conjunction to Venus and Aquarius. Now you're trying to process some of that, or you may feel so what we don't want to do, and this just kind of came to me, is twist people's words or take something the wrong way. So if you are having one of those types of conversations, make sure there's clarity around what is said. If not, and you're sitting and you're dwelling with something, you may then be having a hard time processing something emotionally. I hope that kind of makes sense. And now with the moon square to Saturn, again, this can show up in even two, the moon is in Gemini. So you're trying to kind of relay what you're feeling in a way, in some way, right? And there's limitation with that, or you could be met with resistance. And then on Friday, we have the moon in Cancer. And this is a great energy. The moon is at home in Cancer. Cancer is ruled by the moon. So this is great for our emotional world, processing emotions. The only thing I will say, and where this can become a little bit challenging, is because all of the energy in Cancer is quincunxing the energy in Aquarius, which then becomes a bit psychological. With quincunxes, I find this is usually something that's quite psychological that needs to be addressed. So there may be something that is brought up at some point through the week where the emotional world isn't aligning with everything said or everything you're thinking, or even anything that you want to kind of take action with. The moon forming a conjunction to Jupiter retrograde, though, in Cancer. With Jupiter retrograde, this becomes all internalized. This is about internal wisdom, internal knowing, and developing internal strength, especially emotionally. And that can definitely be something that we're all navigating this week, especially come the end of the week. There is the possibility to develop some really internal, emotional stability. Yeah, like, especially when the moon forms that conjunction to Jupiter, it will be an exact quincunx to both Mercury and Venus at 17 degrees of Aquarius. So there is something here that does show that. I'm sure for some of you, this is going to have to do with relationships and one on one connections and conversations that are being had this week. And there is a deep emotional processing going on. And just make sure you're not acting before you really think things through. Make sure that you are processing everything kind of slowly and that we're not just taking action this week based off of some random thoughts or what we think people meant by a conversation. We just want to make sure this week there is clarity around conversations and things being said, or even maybe somebody misunderstanding something that you say, and then that can cause hurdles down the road. So that is an energy we are, in a little bit this week that we just want to be mindful and aware of. And then we get to Saturday. Now, once we get to Saturday, we've got that moon entering Leo and the build up to the full moon in Leo, which is going to take place at 13 degrees of Leo. And I will be posting a separate forecast going over the chart for the full moon I will get into how that is showing up for each rising sign. So make sure you watch for that. That will be posted within the first few days of this week. I'm also working on my February horoscopes for each rising sign. So watch for that as well. But yeah, once we get into Saturday, we start to enter this full moon energy. We're going to start to feel the build up to the full moon. And keep in mind, this is going to be the last lunation in Leo that's not an eclipse for the next 2 years. So, this area of our charts, of our lives, are going to be going through massive changes. This full moon in Leo, even though it's not an eclipse, there may be a little sneak peek into what those changes could be, or there could even be something kind of bubbling to the surface and making itself known just a little bit as to what the next 2 years are going to look like. So we also definitely want to watch for that. What new is showing up? What is showing up in your world? What is and this can be as far as getting something in the mail, somebody telling you something. When you're going about your day and something just happens that sticks in your mind, it sticks out for some reason. You're not sure why, but then realize later on down the road when something else comes up, okay, that's why I felt that there was something with that. So that's like what this can be. Something can come in or show up that you'll be revisiting for the next 2 years, and that can be going through massive change. Alrighty, so I hope this helps you navigate the energy for the week ahead. Watch for those February horoscopes and my full moon forecast, and I will connect with you all in the next one. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.